If you've spent more than a minute on Etsy, you've probably noticed a huge trend that is all over Etsy bestsellers and dominates nearly every niche. It looks a little something like this, or like this, and sometimes like this. There are literally bestsellers all over the place with this one thing in common. Any guesses? If you said personalization, you'd be right. And while most of the time we're talking about applying these trends to apparel, I'm often asked, how do you apply it to something other than apparel, like perhaps blankets, where the competition isn't quite so crazy? Especially when you see listings out there like this one that has literally sold 129 times in the last 24 hours. That's not a typo. 129 times in the last 24 hours. If you were here with me a couple weeks ago for my top blanket selection video, you know that blankets are one of my favorite non-apparel products, and the opportunities for a product like this are endless, including the huge trend of personalization. So in today's video, I want to show you, number one, how to create your own variation in Canva so that it's unique to your ideal customer. Number two, how to easily create a pattern of that design in Printify. And number three, how to create a mock-up and listing video for your blanket using Placeit. In case we haven't met yet, my name is Mandy, and as the owner of multiple six-figure businesses, including Etsy print-on-demand shops, my goal is to provide you with strategies to simplify the journey and scale your business faster so that you can stop the overwhelm, start making progress, and thrive with your print-on-demand business. First, let's talk about why personalization across any product type is such a big trend and why it presents so many different opportunities. Number one, it creates an instant connection for a customer. So much about demand has to do with being able to create that connection and creating something that's unique and specific for your customers. Keepsakes and items that have elements that are not only specific but personal to them create that emotional connection. And number two, it is one of the most versatile concepts that you can apply to literally anything and everything, from destinations to hobbies to professions and identities and milestones and everything in between. It can also have the ability to stand the test of time because it can continue to be used in so many new and different ways. So then, how do you make this concept work on something like a blanket? Well, number one, you're going to get creative. That means you're not going to just add a name on a blanket and call it a day. That will have you mixed in with all of these other bestsellers, and it will be really hard for your new listing to get some traction. Instead, you're going to get specific with your niche and sub-niches, and you're going to create a version that resonates specifically with them and is unique and has some differentiation from what's already out on the market. And number two, you're going to add extra levels of details that make it unique and special for the customer with personalization. Because again, this is all about your specific target customer. Let's walk it through together. First, let's start with the actual niche that I'm going to use as the basis for this design. The shop that I use for sharing regularly on this channel is all about dogs. There are some dog mom blankets out there already on Etsy with a paw and sometimes a dog name or even a face. So what do we do when a niche is a little bit saturated? We go deeper into a sub-niche. In this particular case, I know from research and from current data in my shop that Doberman Pinscher dog moms are a great audience. If you haven't checked out my time blocking series, head to the research video in that series that I've linked for you where you can see how I arrived at that decision to add Dobermans as a sub-niche in my dog mom shop. For now, let's dive into the actual design. As I mentioned, I want to make a pattern similar to what I know is already super popular, but with my own niche spin on it and some unique ways I'm going to differentiate it. And in this case, since I'm going to leverage Printify's pattern tool, I only want to create the exact portion that I want to repeat, and so I will start in this case by using just a long narrow canvas of 3000 by 900. I'm going to include a name as a placeholder for the design. I'm going to be making the design white so that it works on different colored blankets. So I also like to change the background color so I can see what I'm working on. Then I'm going to search in Canva Elements for a paw design. I want it to be a little different than the standard paw, so I'll select one that has a heart. Then, because I want this to be specifically for a Doberman Pinscher owner, I'm going to do a quick search and see what I can find for a silhouette. For silhouettes, Canva usually has a few for various niches, and I want one specifically where I can change the color to match the rest of the white design. For this design, I'll grab a Doberman silhouette. This same concept could literally be applied to most niches for blankets. If you want to do a custom soccer mom or soccer player blanket, you could pull various elements for those. Same thing goes for elements for a nurse or a teacher blanket, or even other popular niches right now like pickleball. Think about elements that you can pull into a simple design while still making it unique to your customer. I'm specifically doing this design with white, so I'm looking for silhouettes, but you could easily use colored graphics for this too. Once we've got our basic design in Canva, I'm going to export it. You can use a PNG with a transparent background, but if you have Canva Pro, I actually recommend downloading it as an SVG or a scalable vector graphic, which basically just means that you can scale your design as big or as small as you need to, and it should maintain its resolution. If you are ever making a full blanket design, start with a smaller canvas in Canva, save it as an SVG, and you can easily make it much bigger when you get to Printify without having to design on a huge canvas. Speaking of Printify, let's start with my favorite blanket, the Velveteen Minky blanket from Pick the Gift. We'll select that and start designing. I'm going to add in the graphic that I saved and then temporarily change the color of the blanket so I can see what I'm working with. Once my design is uploaded, here comes the fun part. I'm going to reposition the design so that it's smaller. It doesn't make a huge difference where it's at this point. And then I'm going to toggle on the Create Pattern button. It's going to look a little weird at first. Bear with me. We have pattern options. I'm going to select, in this case, the offset brick horizontal option. That is going to give me that offset look that is so popular with the blankets with names on them. Depending on the spacing of your graphic, you can adjust the horizontal and vertical spacing. That just makes your design closer or further apart, which I will sometimes adjust, especially depending on the font or the size of the original graphic. There is also angle and horizontal offset. I typically don't need those, but they are there if you want to play around with it and see how it affects your design, and it can work for certain items. This blanket also has the multiple sizes, so I want to make sure I select each of those on this screen as well. I also want customers to be able to pick different colored blankets. You'll notice that I intentionally left the design as transparent and that Printify allows me to change the blanket color. Remember when we started, we just set it as a basic placeholder to change the color. You can choose from the basic colors that are there, but I actually like to select my colors in Canva and then simply copy and paste that hex code into Printify. I'll talk a little bit more about the options that I create for customers when we get to the actual listing photos. I can preview the design one more time, and then before saving, I'm going to select one of the full-size mock-ups of the blanket as a preview, and then I'm going to click on this little button at the very bottom that says the download template. Again, you'll see why we use this in a little bit. Once we save it, this will then take us to our finished listing. From here, I typically add in all of my usual listing information here on the Printify side so that it transfers over to Etsy and reduces the number of steps that I take there. So I will build out my title using long tail keyword phrases with my most relevant keywords at the beginning of the title, and I'm also going to separate with commas because that makes things easier to read for customers. In the description, I'm going to copy and paste in a template that I've already used for blankets before, so that I've got the basic 1 to 2 sentences in the beginning. I'll change a couple of the dog breed items in there so that it's specific to this listing. I've also got the specifications of the blanket and some of the other items that I include in my description that help customers as they're looking at this listing. Ordinarily, I'd actually just be duplicating an existing product in Printify and starting with that one that already has this information in there, but I wanted to show you this one from start to finish. Then I'll select my shipping profile that I've already got set up in Etsy for Pick the Gift. Under pricing, I typically use my standard 65%, which I found to work really well for most products and still gives me wiggle room to experiment with different pricing strategies, discounts, and shipping on the Etsy side of things. I'm going to adjust the rates on here slightly simply because my other blankets in my shop have a flat rate and I'm just keeping them consistent, but you can see it's still right around that 65% mark. For publishing, I am just going to go ahead and let this publish as normal and not hidden, and for the variant visibility, I always select the top option, which is to show all variants regardless of Printify stock. There is a huge misconception that Printify is constantly syncing stock levels with Etsy and showing things out of stock and in stock on a live basis, and it's not. The details from Printify to Etsy only sync once, unless you come back in here and make edits and republish. This freaks out some sellers when it comes to apparel, especially since different sizes and colors can go in and out of stock, but generally I don't worry about it too much. Common apparel, in particular like Gildans or Bellas or Comfort Colors, fluctuate regularly, so just because it's out of stock at the time you create the product doesn't mean it's always going to be that way. So that's why I don't set it that way. I want them to show in stock in the beginning and then monitor it on an ongoing basis once it's published. Once that's all set, it's time to publish. While that is syncing with Etsy, I'm going to get my listing photos ready. I've actually created listing photo templates that have color swatches where I'm going to allow the customer to pick the color of the blanket, which I can then easily customize when I create it in Printify. I've also added a slide where customers can select from a few different fonts. I have limited my options to some of the more popular font choices, such as a retro style, a collegiate style, one that's got a more groovy effect to it, a script option, and then also a standard kind of minimalist text. Some listings like the one we saw out on Etsy have lots of different choices, oftentimes over 30 plus. And while it's great to have options, there is such a thing as decision fatigue with customers, and so that can be super overwhelming to have lots of choices. So I like to just keep it simple. Another slide that I have in here is a blanket size chart. I created this one to show approximately the size differences of the 3 different options that are available for these types of blankets and suggestions of how they can best be used. And then the last slide that I incorporate highlights some of the more important aspects of the product for the customer to be aware of, including that they're lightweight, single-sided print, machine washable, and a note at the bottom indicating that the white base underneath will be visible and more noticeable for darker print colors, while also assuring the customer that this is a normal part of the printing process. Notice that I don't have mock-ups in here just yet. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and save these as JPEGs so that they're ready for my listing. Why do I save these as JPEGs now instead of PNGs? Well, JPEGs are quite a bit smaller, so they take up less space and will still work really well for your listing. Now, when it comes to mock-ups, blankets can be a little tricky because it's not simply a placement process like it is with apparel or even totes. I like to use Place It for my blankets and for other non-apparel items. I specifically say non-apparel because I find that a lot of the apparel items don't always look realistic to the actual product, which, as we know from recent events, can be a little problematic on Etsy. However, I do find that the mock-ups for non-apparel items like mugs, totes, and blankets are actually pretty good as long as you're careful about the ones that you pick, and I have continued to feel comfortable with using them. If I type in blanket and search for mock-ups, I can see that there are a few options. Some of them are specific, like Sherpa, which Printify does offer Sherpa blankets, and others look pretty accurate based on what I know these velveteen blankets actually look like. So I'm going to use this one. We can now upload our design, and you'll recall that I saved the template from Printify for the actual blanket mock-up with its pattern and everything from there. So this is where that comes into play. I'm going to upload that, and then I'm going to simply crop out the white border. You can certainly remove the background too, but it's not necessary since you need to zoom in on the design anyway for accuracy. And then I just use the Printify mockup as a relative guide for how big or small I need to adjust the image. The image is going to look a little more subdued in the mockup, and that's actually a good thing. Remember from my blanket comparison video that it's normal for print to be a bit muted, and the minky velveteen texture contributes to that. So this works to our advantage here in Placeit. Much like with apparel, you don't want your designs on here to be super bright and crisp because that's just not how they're going to appear on the actual product. You can also change the surrounding element colors like the pillows or the bed sheets in this particular case, which is helpful if you have a specific design or decor that you're trying to match. From here, I'll go ahead and download. Then I'll search for a blanket video. They don't have a ton of options, so this is the main one that I typically use and it works well. So we'll once again repeat the process of placing and cropping. Since I already uploaded it once, I can simply pull this down from my previous uploads that are in Placeit. I do turn off the audio on these since it's just for the listing video in Etsy and there's no audio on those. To download, you'll first need to click on Play All Slides and then you'll have the option to download from there. I do want to note that you could also create just a slideshow with what you have from images over in Canva. And I have a link to my mockups video so you can see how to do that. It's just as fast and just as easy and works just as well, but since I'm already using Placeit for the mockups, I like to use the blanket video that's there just for something a little different. Now that we've got our mockup, a listing video, and our other listing photos, we're ready to finish in Etsy, and now that Printify has finished publishing. I typically delete out the extra sizes that come over from Printify. I wanted to keep some of these in here so you can only limit those so far in Printify's mockups, so I just delete what I don't need. Then I'll upload my listing photos and my Placeit mockup along with my Placeit video. Once those are loaded, I'll adjust my listing photos so that the Placeit one is in the front. You'll get a little warning about the size, and that's fine. Just make sure that on that first listing photo, you adjust the thumbnail so that there's a nice visual of the blanket details. For the listing video, if it's coming from Placeit, I will sometimes crop it, especially since this is a tall vertical video, and you could easily do that right from an Etsy. The title came over from Printify, but I do want to adjust the other areas on the listing. You'll want to select another company or person for the About section because we are using a production partner for our item. If you're using this particular blanket, then I also select minky, polyester, and velveteen under the material list. You can select any colors or other related attributes that might be relevant. Remember, only select what's relevant here. Then we'll select potential recipients, which could be for anyone. So in this case, I'll select all of them. I'll make my renewal selection, my printing partner, and then the section that this will go in. For tags, one of the easiest things I like to do is start with the title. I'll paste that in, hit enter, and it will drop in automatically any keywords that naturally separate with the commas that are under 20 characters in length. From there, I can then simply break down what's left by placing a comma and add in any additional tags to get me to that 13. These tags can be other keywords related to the item and potential searches that could reach my ideal customer. In the variations, you'll want to remove the SKUs since this is a personalized listing. You do not want your personalized orders to go to your regular orders in Printify when one comes in. It's not going to be the worst thing in the world, but you will have to make sure that you catch them so that they don't automatically go into production, especially if you've got your settings set to automatic. I like to do it this way so that these orders for personalized items go into the Other Orders tab in Printify and don't get mixed in with all of my other orders. It keeps things nice and organized and ensures that you have a chance to make your updates to the design before it goes into production. If this is a personalized design, make sure you turn on the personalization button in Etsy and add in instructions for your customer. I've copy and pasted in the verbiage on this one so that the customer identifies the dog name, color, and font. I typically do not check the optional box because I don't want customers to accidentally skip this. Everything else should be good to go and we're ready to publish. And that's it. Now the beauty of personalization is that it has literally endless possibilities and it's going to have some longevity with nearly every niche and trend that's out there. My suggestion, start with what you know. If you already have established niches in your shop, think about how you could creatively leverage those with this approach. I highly recommend going into sub-niches where you can so that you can differentiate yourself from what's already out there. If you don't have niches in your shop, or if you're not sure you have a solid direction on your niches to begin with, I've linked my niche basics and SEO videos for you that will walk you through the process and help you better understand how those work and why they're important. I hope this has been helpful for you. If you want to learn more about my strategies for thriving in your print-on-demand business, make sure you've got the notifications turned on for my channel so that you don't miss out on any of my content. And in the meantime, be sure to check out the dedicated playlist with my full print-on-demand masterclass course right here on YouTube, as well as my time blocking series for an even deeper dive on the critical steps for success. Thanks for watching. I'm so glad you're here, and I'll see you in the next one.